Humanity had always been underestimated. For centuries, Earth had been seen as nothing more than a small, insignificant planet in the vast galaxy. But behind the scenes, something massive was taking shape. In secret, the world's greatest minds had been working together, building an army unlike anything the universe had ever seen. No one knew about the planet-sized warships that had been constructed in the dark corners of space. These warships weren't like the ordinary ships humanity used for exploration. They were enormous, powerful, and capable of destroying entire planets. Humanity had kept this secret hidden from the other galactic empires, knowing that once they revealed their strength, there would be no turning back. The warships were Earth's ultimate weapon, and the galaxy was about to find out. It all began many years ago when Earth's leaders realized they were falling behind the other empires in terms of military power. The alien civilizations had vast fleets of ships, unimaginable technology, and armies that could conquer entire worlds. For a time, humanity was content to live in the shadows, just a small player in the galactic game. But that changed when a brilliant group of scientists came together, sharing their knowledge in secret. They knew Earth would never survive in the galaxy if they didn't find a way to compete. Their answer was to build ships so powerful that no one would dare challenge them. These ships were hidden on moons orbiting distant planets, away from the prying eyes of alien empires. The construction was slow and meticulous, but over time, they began to take shape. Each warship was bigger than anything humanity had ever imagined. Some were the size of entire cities, others as large as continents. Each was equipped with powerful weapons that could destroy anything in its path. And so, humanity's greatest weapon was born, hidden in the vast reaches of space, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the time for waiting was over. The leaders of Earth knew that the galaxy's attention would soon turn to them. The moment had come to reveal their secret. One by one, the planet-sized warships began to rise from their hidden locations. Their engines powered up, and the once silent ships began to move, slowly but surely, toward the heart of the galaxy. As the warships moved through space, they sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The most powerful empires, who had thought they were untouchable, were now facing the unknown. These ships, with their dark, intimidating silhouettes, were unlike anything the empires had ever seen. The other civilizations had built fleets of ships, but nothing compared to the scale and power of the warships from Earth. The galaxy was on edge. The other empires began to panic. They had heard rumors, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy about Earth's secret weapon, but no one had believed it. Now they were about to witness the power of humanity. The first warship emerged from the shadow of a distant moon and set its course toward a nearby empire. The first empire to feel the wrath of Earth was the Galactic Empire. Known for their powerful fleet and vast territory, they had long been one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. They were confident in their strength, but they had never faced anything like this. When they saw the massive warship appear on their radar, they initially thought it was a mistake, a glitch in their sensors. But as the ship grew closer, they realized the truth. Humanity had built a weapon beyond their wildest imagination. Galactic Empire attempted to prepare their defenses, but it was too late. The warship fired its first shot, and in an instant, the Galactic fleet was obliterated. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. Entire planets were destroyed in the wake of the blast. The Galactic Empire, once the most powerful in the galaxy, was reduced to nothing more than a pile of rubble. The galaxy was in shock. No one had expected this. Humanity, the small and insignificant species, had just taken down an entire empire in the blink of an eye. The other empires, seeing the destruction of the Galactic Empire, were left speechless. How had humanity done this? What else were they hiding? The truth was simple. Earth had been biding its time. Humanity had always known that they would have to fight for their place in the galaxy. They had built the warships not just as weapons, but as symbols of their strength. The other empires had underestimated them for too long, and now it was time to make them pay. But this was just the beginning. As the warship sailed through the stars, Earth's leaders knew they couldn't stop now. They had to send a message to every empire in the galaxy. Humanity was no longer a weak, insignificant species. They were a force to be reckoned with. The empires that had once laughed at them now had to face the truth. Earth's time had come. As the warships continued their journey across the stars, more empires began to fall. One by one, they were brought to their knees. The rest of the galaxy watched in fear as humanity's power grew. No one could stop them. The fate of the galaxy was about to change forever, and so Earth's hidden power was revealed, shaking the galaxy to its core. The first empire had fallen, but there was no telling how far humanity would go. Would they stop at one victory, or was this just the beginning of a new era? Only time would tell. The Garlan Empire was a formidable force in the galaxy, its fleets spreading across the stars with unmatched precision. For centuries, the Empire had been the dominant power, its vast territory unchallenged by any other civilization. Their ships were fast, their weapons deadly, and their strategy flawless. The Garlan Emperor believed they were invincible, and in many ways he was right. No one had ever dared to challenge them, until now. When the first of Earth's warships appeared in their territory, the Garlan fleet was caught off guard. Initially, they thought it was a scout ship or a mere anomaly, some small vessel that had strayed too far into their space. But as the ship grew larger on their radar, their initial dismissive attitude quickly turned to panic. This was no ordinary ship. It was massive, towering over their best fleets, casting a shadow that stretched across their homeworld like a dark omen. A call was sent out to the Emperor, and soon the Garland's entire fleet was mobilized. The Empire's best ships, each one designed to destroy entire planets, moved swiftly to intercept this strange, gigantic vessel. But the more they moved, the more they realized that something was wrong. The planet-sized ship wasn't trying to avoid them, it was heading straight toward their core world, and it was moving faster than any ship they had in their arsenal. They knew, deep down, that this was not just an ordinary attack, it was an extinction-level event. The fleet's admiral, an experienced and respected leader named Karnak, barked orders through the chaos. He tried to form a defensive line, positioning his ships in front of the approaching warship, but every maneuver he made seemed pointless. Nothing could hold back the ship's relentless approach. The enormous warship loomed closer, dwarfing even the mightiest of the Garlan Empire's ships. Karnak's mind raced as the realization set in. The enemy had the power to wipe out everything they had built, and they didn't even need to try hard. "Prepare for battle," Karnak ordered, though his voice trembled with fear. It was a futile attempt to buy time, but there was no real hope left. He had to warn the Emperor. At that moment, the first shots rang out. The warship unleashed a barrage of energy beams that struck with devastating precision. Entire fleets were torn apart in an instant. Ships that had once been the pride of the Garlan Empire now burned in the vacuum of space. Explosions sent shockwaves through the fleet, and within seconds, whole squadrons were wiped out, leaving behind nothing but debris. Karnak watched helplessly as his forces were scattered, disintegrated by the sheer force of the attack. In the Emperor's palace, the Garlan leader was surrounded by his closest advisors. He had been briefed about the alien warship, but he refused to believe it could truly pose a threat. He had heard the rumors about Earth's hidden weapons, but like most he had dismissed them as fantasy. After all, how could a primitive species like humanity create a ship so powerful? The Emperor laughed it off, confident that the Empire's vast fleets would easily handle any threats. However, as the reports started flooding in, his laughter died. The Garlan Emperor's expression turned to one of disbelief. His empire, his legacy, was being wiped out before his very eyes. His advisors scrambled to offer solutions, but it was clear that nothing they could do would stop the oncoming disaster. "We must surrender," one advisor suggested, but the Emperor's pride refused to allow it. "No," the Emperor snapped. "We will not surrender. We will fight until the very end." But the end was coming fast. The warship's power was unimaginable. Every blast from its massive cannons felt like the end of an era. The Garlan fleet, once the pride of the galaxy, was now nothing more than a distant memory, scattered across the stars. The Emperor had no choice but to watch as his empire fell apart. His greatest mistake had been underestimating humanity, and now it was too late to undo it. In the midst of the chaos, the remaining Garlan ships scattered, retreating into deep space, hoping to escape the wrath of Earth's warship. The warship, however, pursued relentlessly, firing without mercy. Back on Earth, humanity watched with a strange mix of pride and uncertainty. No one had ever expected to be the ones to strike first. No one had expected to wield such unimaginable power. But now that the first empire had fallen, the world was left to ask one question: what next? The leaders of Earth were as shocked as the rest of the galaxy. They had known the warships were powerful, but they hadn't fully grasped just how much destruction they could cause. It wasn't just a matter of conquering planets anymore, it was about sending a message. Earth was no longer the weak and forgotten species that the galaxy had always viewed them as. They were powerful, they were unstoppable. But as the warships continued their path of destruction, some on Earth began to question the consequences of their actions. Could they be trusted with such power? Was the galaxy prepared for the rise of humanity as the most powerful force in existence? And so, as the last remnants of the Galan Empire were left to float aimlessly through space, the galaxy braced itself. One empire had fallen, but there were many more. The question wasn't if humanity would conquer more, it was, when. The ripple effects of Earth's surprise attack on the Galan Empire spread through the galaxy like wildfire. News of the destruction spread across countless worlds, and soon, entire empires began to panic. They had all dismissed Earth as a minor player in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but now, as they watched the ashes of the Galan Empire drift through space, they realized just how wrong they had been. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. In fact, it had just become the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The first response came from the mighty Corinne Empire, known for their fierce warriors and enormous fleets. They had ruled a massive region of space for centuries. They had crushed countless civilizations, and no one had ever stood a chance against. But now, they saw the ashes of the Galan Empire and feared that they might be next. Earth's warships were powerful, too powerful, and the Corinne could not allow this new threat to go unchallenged. Emperor Zalith of the Corinne Empire called for a gathering of his top commanders. The Corinne were not a race to bow before anyone, especially not humans. Their fleets were unmatched in strength, their weapons capable of tearing planets apart. But even they were unsure of how to deal with the new power that had risen in the galaxy. There was no telling what humanity's warships could do if they turned their attention to the Corinne. "I will not cower before these humans," Zalith declared, his voice filled with defiance. "Send our fleet to confront them. We will show them the might of the Corinne." The Corinne fleet mobilized quickly. Thousands of warships, each equipped with advanced weaponry and shields, powered up and set course for the heart of Earth's new domain. They would bring their vast armada to bear, hoping to strike fear into humanity and force them to retreat. They believed that a decisive battle would be enough to crush this new threat before it could grow any stronger. But as the Corinne fleet moved toward Earth's territories, something strange began to happen. The more they advanced, the more they realized that they were being watched. The feeling of being hunted set in, like a predator's gaze bearing down on them from the shadows. Earth's warships had somehow anticipated their move, and the Corinne were walking into a trap. As the first Corinne ships entered Earth's space, they were met with silence. The warships that had decimated the Galan Empire were nowhere to be seen. For a moment, the Corinne believed that they had arrived at an empty world, that perhaps humanity had grown too complacent in its new power, but they were wrong. The moment they let down their guard, Earth's fleet struck. Suddenly, the sky was filled with fire. Massive energy blasts erupted from nowhere, tearing through the Corinne's ranks. The Corinne commanders screamed orders into their communication systems, but it was too late. The warships that had been thought to be just a legend now appeared. Before them dozens of planet-sized ships, each bristling with weapons and shields that were far superior to anything the Corinne had ever encountered. The once invincible fleet was now under attack, their ships falling one by one, as Earth's warships obliterated them with ease. It was a sight that would haunt the galaxy for eons to come. For the first time in history, an empire that had once been invincible was on the brink of collapse, brought to its knees by the unthinkable power of humanity. The Corinne fleet was scattered, their warships reduced to wreckage. As Earth's warships circled overhead, ready to strike again, the battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Earth's forces were unstoppable. The Corinne, despite their best efforts, had nothing that could match the sheer scale and power of humanity's warships. The Emperor of the Corinne, watching his empire crumble from his palace on a distant world, could only watch as his legacy was destroyed in a single day. The message was clear. The galaxy had no place for arrogance anymore. Earth was not just a participant in the galactic war, they had become the dominant force. As the remnants of the Corinne fleet fled into deep space, their commanders knew that they would never recover from this defeat. The power of Earth had been unleashed, and nothing would ever be the same. Back on Earth, the leaders who had once feared what their warships could do now found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. They had awakened a new era in the galaxy, one where humanity ruled with overwhelming power. The question no longer was whether they could conquer the galaxy, it was whether they should, but that thought was pushed aside quickly. Earth had tasted victory, and with it came the intoxicating power of control. There was no turning back now. The warships had proven their might, and humanity was ready for more. The galaxy had watched as two empires, one that had once been considered unbeatable, the other merely a primitive world, faced off in an epic battle. And Earth had won. The real challenge had only just begun. Other empires, sensing their own vulnerabilities, were already preparing their forces, but this time, they knew they would be facing something unlike anything they had ever imagined. Humanity was not done. They had started a chain reaction that no one could stop, and soon, the entire galaxy would realize the truth. Earth's warships were only the beginning. The rise of humanity had only just begun, and the empires that had once ruled the stars would have to learn that they were no longer the dominant force in the universe. Earth was here to stay, and they were not going to stop until the entire galaxy knew their name. The galaxy trembled in the wake of Earth's unrelenting rise to power. The destruction of the Garlan and Korean empires sent a shockwave of fear throughout the stars, and every civilization began to question their own survival. What had once seemed an isolated, insignificant planet had now become the harbinger of unimaginable destruction. There was no more laughing at humanity's expense. Earth's warships had shattered empires with terrifying ease, and no one knew what would come next. In the grand halls of the Zentrak Empire, the leaders were in full crisis mode. The Zentrak, a civilization of ancient warriors known for their ruthless conquest of neighboring systems, had always been proud of their military superiority. Their fleets were massive, and their battle strategies legendary. Yet, as they stared at the decimated remains of the Korean fleet, they realized they were facing something entirely new. "We must act quickly," Admiral Vornok said, his voice cold and calculating. "The humans are no longer just a threat to our borders, they are a threat to our entire existence." The Zentrak had always prided themselves on their strength, but now they understood that strength alone would not be enough. Their warships, while advanced, were no match for the scale and power of Earth's weaponry. They needed something more, a strategy that would not only protect them from the human threat, but would also allow them to strike first, before Earth's fleet could advance any further. Admiral Vornok's plan was as daring as it was dangerous. He knew that Earth's warships had been hiding for years, preparing for a moment like this. The key to defeating them, he believed, lay in one simple truth: humanity's warships, though powerful, were still vulnerable in ways the Zentrak fleet could exploit. They just needed to find a way to outmaneuver the humans. They needed to strike at their core, where Earth's warships were being built. If they could destroy the source of humanity's power, the warships would fall, and Earth's grip on the galaxy would crumble. The Zentrak fleet moved swiftly, gathering ships from across their empire. They did not approach Earth directly, fearing the immense firepower waiting for them. Instead, they entered deep space, hoping to bypass Earth's defenses and strike at the heart of the warship construction sites. It was a risky move, but it was their only option. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders were becoming increasingly aware of the galaxy's response. Despite their overwhelming victories, they knew that the other empires would not sit idly by. They had to act fast and decisively before any further challenges arose. The leaders of Earth, in a rare moment of unity, gathered for an emergency meeting. They had proven their power, but the real test had yet to come. The galaxy was not going to let them conquer with ease. "We cannot afford to underestimate them," said President Isabel Vance, humanity's leader. "The Zentrak will be looking for any weakness. We need to be prepared." But Earth's military commanders were confident. They had watched the Zentrak's movements, tracked their fleet's trajectory, and were ready for whatever they might attempt. The warships that had once been Earth's secret weapon were now fully deployed, their cannons armed and ready. They had no intention of letting the Zentrak or any empire threaten their dominance. As the Zentrak fleet neared Earth's space, they made their move. With their advanced stealth technology, they slipped past Earth's outer defenses, creeping silently toward the uncharted regions where the warships were constructed. The plan was to strike quickly, disable the production facilities, and retreat before Earth's fleet could respond. But what the Zentrak had not counted on was that Earth had been preparing for this very moment. The moment they crossed into Earth's restricted zone, the Zentrak fleet triggered a trap they hadn't seen coming. Energy beams lit up the dark expanse of space as hidden warships activated, and the once calm void erupted in a cacophony of destruction. Earth had anticipated their every move. It was a calculated risk that had paid off. As the Zentrak fleet found itself under attack, quickly became apparent that their advanced technology wasn't enough to outmaneuver the sheer force of Earth's warships. The humans had learned from every battle, perfected their strategies, and were now one step ahead. The Zentrak, despite their reputation for military genius, were outmatched. The battle was intense, but it was short. Earth's warships, positioned like sentinels around the construction sites, unleashed their full fury on the Zentrak fleet. One by one, the Zentrak ships were destroyed, their defenses failing against the might of humanity's weaponry. The battle had turned into a one-sided massacre, and the Zentrak, once confident in their own superiority, now realized a terrible truth. Earth was unstoppable. Admiral Voronok, who had led the Zentrak fleet into the heart of the storm, watched in horror as his ships were torn apart. His fleet, once a symbol of strength, was no more. The realization hit him hard. They had miscalculated. They had underestimated humanity once again. As his flagship, the Zoroth, was hit by a devastating blast, he knew the battle was lost. As Earth's warships stood victorious, a chilling silence fell over the galaxy. The Zentrak, like the Garland and Corinne before them, had fallen. The fear that had gripped the other empires was now palpable. The message from Earth was clear. There was no stopping them. The warships, once thought to be an unstoppable force, had proven their dominance yet again. Back on Earth, the leaders and commanders watched the reports with a mixture of relief and unease. Their victory over the Zentrak was another confirmation of their power, but deep down, they knew the galaxy was watching. What they had unleashed could not be contained forever. There were still empires out there waiting, planning, and perhaps, one day they would strike back. For now, however, Earth stood unchallenged. But the question lingered: how long could humanity maintain this dominance? How long before another empire, wiser and more prepared, would rise to challenge them? Only time would tell. But for now, humanity held the stars in their grasp, and they weren't about to let go. The victory over the Zentrak Empire was meant to be another glorious chapter in Earth's rise to dominance. Yet, even as the final echoes of the battle faded into the vastness of space, a strange unease began to settle over humanity's leaders. They had defeated yet another powerful empire, crushed them with overwhelming force, but the galaxy was not standing still. Far beyond Earth's warships, beyond the reaches of human surveillance, new whispers began to spread. Whispers of alliances forming, of the remnants of defeated empires quietly banding together to face this new, terrifying threat. Humanity's warships had proven their might time and time again, but every empire that had fallen before them had left behind a legacy: knowledge, resources, and a thirst for revenge. And the truth was this: while humanity had crushed their enemies, they hadn't eradicated them. They had merely pushed the remnants back into the shadows. And there, in the darkness, they were preparing. The galaxy was changing, but not in the way humanity had imagined. Earth's leaders had expected the other empires to cower before their power, to bend the knee in fear of their warships. But instead, something unexpected happened. The empires that had once been at odds, who had never trusted one another, were now looking to unite. They were coming together in the face of a common enemy: humanity. A coalition formed, one that included the surviving members of the Garland, Corinne, and Zentrak empires, along with others who had long felt the sting of Earth's rapid rise. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful forces were willing to put aside their differences. The idea was simple: if humanity's warships were left unchecked, they would conquer everything. They had already destroyed 3 powerful empires. What was to stop them from doing the same to the rest of the galaxy? The first alliance of the galaxy was born out of desperation. They pooled their resources, their knowledge, and their fleets, vowing to stop Earth before it was too late. The coalition was ragged at first. Old grudges still lingered between factions, but it didn't matter. They had one shared goal: to bring down humanity's warships and prevent Earth from becoming the undisputed ruler of the stars. Back on Earth, the leaders were still basking in the glory of their victories, unaware of the growing storm on the horizon. Humanity had shown incredible resilience and strength, but they had not anticipated the speed with which their enemies would react. The leaders knew the galaxy feared them, but they hadn't yet realized how seriously their enemies were taking this fear. The coalition was not simply worried, they were terrified. As Earth's warships patrolled the vastness of space, moving ever closer to their next target, something began to shift in the cosmic balance. The warship's advanced sensors picked up a new signal. At first it was dismissed as a random disturbance, a glitch in the system, but as the signal grew stronger, it became impossible to ignore. Something was out there, something big. The coalition had been gathering their forces in secret, building fleets that could rival humanity's might. The plan was clear: lure the warships into an ambush, strike with everything they had, and destroy humanity's fleet before it could fully deploy. The coalition knew that they could not defeat the warships head-on. They were too powerful to advance, but they could surprise them, overwhelm them in a way that would force Earth to retreat. The coalition fleet moved into position, hidden in the dark voids of space, waiting for Earth's warships to fall into their trap. It was a strategy built on deception, on outsmarting humanity, something that had never been done before. But the leaders of the coalition knew this would be their only chance. If they failed, it would be the end of their civilizations. The moment came quickly. Earth's warships, arrogant in their invincibility, moved into the trap. The coalition fleet struck first, firing everything they had. The ambush was brutal, the attacks coming from all angles, overwhelming the human ships. The sheer number of ships in the coalition fleet, combined with their sudden and unexpected assault, caused the first cracks to appear in Earth's impenetrable defense. For the first time, the warships of humanity faltered. It was a surprise to everyone. Earth's warships were designed to withstand attacks from all directions, to adapt and retaliate with unmatched precision. But the scale of the assault, the number of ships, and the strategic cunning of the coalition forces caught them off guard. The human fleet was forced to fall back, to regroup, something they had never done before. Earth's military commanders watched in shock as the once unstoppable warships faced real danger for the first time. The ambush had worked. The warships had been wounded, their systems strained. Humanity had always relied on overwhelming power, but now, in the face of this united front, it seemed even their greatest weapon could be defeated. The battle was intense, with the coalition forces continuing their relentless assault. Earth's commanders scrambled to bring the full force of their warships to bear, but the coalition was too well prepared, too determined. For the first time in history, Earth's warships were facing the possibility of defeat. The leader of the coalition, a general from the Karen Empire named Valara, watched from her command ship as the battle unfolded. She had always believed that humanity's power would be their downfall. They had grown too confident, too certain of their victory, but now she could see the cracks. The warships that had once seemed invincible were faltering. The human commanders, once so sure of themselves, were now scrambling, struggling to regain control of the battlefield. It was a moment of triumph for the coalition, but they knew it was only the beginning. The battle had shown them that Earth's warships were not invincible. Humanity was not unstoppable. The coalition had proven that they could fight back, that they could challenge Earth's dominance, but even as victory seemed within reach, a new question arose. If the coalition could defeat humanity's warships, what would come next? Could the galaxy ever truly be at peace? Or had this war, this struggle for supremacy, only just begun? The coalition's unexpected victory over Earth's warships sent ripples of disbelief and awe throughout the galaxy. For the first time, the empires that had once cowered in fear of humanity's power dared to hope. The coalition had done the impossible. They had struck a blow to Earth's seemingly invincible forces. But that victory came at a great cost. The battle had been fierce, and the cost of the lives lost on both sides was staggering. Yet despite the chaos and destruction, something profound was beginning to shift in the hearts and minds of those who had once believed Earth's reign was inevitable. As the smoke of battle cleared, both sides took a moment to regroup. Earth's warships, though wounded, were not completely defeated. They retreated to the far reaches of space, but even as they withdrew, their engines hummed with anticipation. Their cannons recharged, ready for the next confrontation. Humanity had been stunned, but they were far from broken. The leaders of the coalition gathered in secret to discuss their next move. The victory had given them a glimmer of hope, but it was clear that they could not win this war through ambushes and hit-and-run tactics alone. They needed something more, a strategy that could ensure that Earth's warships would never again be able to dominate the galaxy. Earth cannot be allowed to regroup, General Valara of the Karen said, her voice calm but firm. They are resilient, but they are not invincible. We must strike quickly, decisively. Her words echoed in the conference room. The other members of the coalition, from the Garland, Zentrak, and several smaller empires, nodded in agreement. They had learned something crucial from their victory. Earth's warships, while powerful, had weaknesses. The coalition had exposed these vulnerabilities during the ambush, and now it was time to exploit them. But even as the coalition planned their next steps, a darker realization loomed over them. Earth's warships were not merely machines of destruction, they were symbols of humanity's spirit. The resilience of the human race, its ability to learn and adapt, had been demonstrated time and again. The warship's retreat wasn't an admission of defeat. It was a tactical withdrawal. Humanity was preparing for something bigger, something far more dangerous than any of the coalition could have imagined. Back on Earth, President Isabel Vance stood before her team of military commanders, staring at a series of holographic displays that depicted the galaxy's shifting power. The defeat had shaken humanity, but it hadn't broken them. There was a steely determination in her eyes as she addressed her commanders. We've faced our first defeat, but we are not done, she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. The coalition may have won one battle, but this war is far from over. We will adapt. We will come back stronger. The commanders nodded in agreement, each one aware of the gravity of their situation. Earth's warships were advanced, yes, but they had relied on sheer force for far too long. The coalition had exposed a crucial flaw in their strategy: humanity's reliance on overwhelming power alone. It was time to rethink their approach. Vance turned to her chief strategist, Admiral Rossetti, who had already begun planning the next phase of the war. He spoke quickly, his mind already calculating their next move. We need to bring the fight to their doorstep. No more defensive strategies. We go on the offensive. We target their capitals. We make them understand that they cannot hide from us. It was a bold plan, but Vance trusted Rossetti's judgment. The warships would be refitted, upgraded with new technology that would make them even more devastating. The humans had learned from their defeat, and now, they would use that knowledge to reshape the battlefield. The coalition had no idea what was coming for them. However, there was another, more troubling issue that loomed over Earth. The war had sparked a philosophical shift in the hearts of many humans. Once they had fought to protect their world, to preserve their place in the galaxy. But now, as the war dragged on, a darker side of humanity began to emerge. Some had started to question whether Earth's power should be used to dominate or liberate. Were they truly fighting for survival, or had they crossed a line into something far more dangerous? In the underground factions that had once been quietly opposed to the war, a new voice began to rise, a voice that called for peace, for diplomacy. Not all humans wanted to rule the galaxy. Some felt that humanity had overstepped its bounds. The conflict that had begun as a fight for survival was now at risk of becoming a quest for domination. And there were those who feared the consequences of such ambition. On a distant moon, an unknown group of humans began to gather, organizing in secret. Their message was clear: stop the war before it's too late. They knew that the galaxy was vast, and that if humanity continued its path of conquest, it would burn every bridge, alienating potential allies and uniting the galaxy against them. The war was not about survival anymore, it was about humanity, asserting its place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. Back in the heart of Earth's war machine, the leaders were blind to this growing resistance. They were focused only on victory, on reclaiming their lost dominance. But as their warships were prepared for the next wave of battle, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. The galaxy watched as humanity prepared to strike again, and this time there was no one left to protect them from the consequences of their unchecked power. The coalition, still reeling from their narrow victory, was also preparing. They knew that Earth's next move would be decisive, and they could not afford to falter. But as they gathered their forces, they too understood something important. This war would not be won by military might alone. The survival of the galaxy hinged on whether the coalition could come together, not just in force, but in purpose. They had to do more than stop humanity. They had to stop humanity from becoming the tyrant of the stars. Earth's warships, powered up for their next mission, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new era. The question wasn't whether humanity would win, it was whether they would be able to keep their humanity in the process. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the very definition of power in the galaxy. And as the warships of Earth readied themselves for the next battle, everyone knew that the next few days would decide the fate of the stars. The galaxy was on the verge of collapse, teetering on the edge of a new, terrifying era. Earth's warships, once a mere whisper of potential, had transformed into the undeniable power that shook every empire to its core. The coalition, though, battered from their previous engagements, had regrouped, formed new alliances, and fortified their resolve. But even as they prepared to take their stand, they knew that Earth's warships, now equipped with new weapons and strategies, were coming for them this time with a force and determination that had never been seen before. The stage was set for the final confrontation, one that would determine whether humanity would rule the stars or whether the galaxy's collective might could shatter their dreams of conquest on Earth. The leaders gathered in the high command chambers, watching as their fleets assembled, preparing for what would undoubtedly be the largest and most decisive battle in galactic history. President Isabel Vance stood at the helm, her mind focused on one goal: victory. There was no room for hesitation now. Humanity had fought too hard, endured too much, to let this chance slip away. "We know what's at stake," Vance said, her voice strong and steady. "We've already conquered so much, but we must finish what we started. The coalition is not just fighting for survival, they are fighting to take back what we've earned." and they will do everything in their power to stop us. Admiral Rossetti, ever the strategist, stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the holographic displays showing the massive fleet formation. The coalition is growing stronger, but we've already proven they can be beaten. We'll strike fast and hit them where it hurts the most, at the heart of their defenses. This time, there will be no retreat. The warships, now enhanced with advanced weaponry, bristled with readiness. Humanity's resolve had never been clearer. They would show the galaxy that Earth was not just a force to be reckoned with, it was the future. The Coalition's alliance, though formidable, was a patchwork of rivalries and old grudges. If humanity struck fast and hard enough, they could break the Coalition apart before it ever had a chance to rally. But there was something humanity had not anticipated, something no one had seen coming. Among the Coalition's ranks, a secret force had been quietly growing in strength, fed by the very fear that Earth's warships had instilled across the galaxy. While the major empires focused on direct military confrontation, a faction within the Coalition had been working on something much more insidious. It was a force not of soldiers or fleets, but of ideas. Ideas that could turn the tide of war, without firing a single shot. As the Coalition fleet prepared to meet Earth's warships head-on, they were not alone. Hidden among their ranks was a faction that had been developing something Earth had never considered: diplomacy. Led by a visionary diplomat from the Zentrak Empire named Cholera, this new group had been secretly working to unite all of the galaxy's peoples, not through force, but through the promise of peace. Cholera knew that if the galaxy was to survive, they needed to think beyond military might. Earth's warships might be powerful, but they had one weakness. Humanity believed their power was unstoppable, but Cholera understood that real power lay in unity, not conquest. Her plan was simple: to show humanity the futility of their pursuit of galactic dominance by offering an alternative. Cholera reached out to Earth's leaders, sending a message in secret, one that could change everything. It was a bold move, a risk that could either lead to peace or to unimaginable destruction. She wasn't just trying to stop Earth's warships, she was trying to stop the war itself, to force both sides to reconsider their paths. On Earth, the message was received with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The Coalition's offer was not one of surrender, but of negotiation. They offered peace, a shared future in which humanity could contribute to the galaxy's greater good rather than conquer it. The proposal was simple: Earth could join the galactic community as an equal, not as a tyrant. In exchange, humanity's warships would stand down, and the galaxy would work together to rebuild, to establish a new order based on cooperation rather than fear. The leaders of Earth, especially President Vance, were hesitant. Peace sounded good, but it was too soon, too fragile. Could they trust the Coalition? Could they even trust themselves after everything that had been done? They had fought so hard to get here, and to lay down their weapons now when victory was almost within their grasp felt like betrayal. Yet the message from Cholera lingered in their minds. What was the cost of continuing the war? Was Earth truly fighting for survival, or had they crossed into something darker? As Earth's warships moved into position, ready to strike the Coalition, one final blow, the question remained: would humanity continue its path of destruction, or would they take the offer of peace? The war had raged for so long that many no longer remembered what it was like to live without it. But Cholera's message had sparked a glimmer of hope in the hearts of those who had witnessed the devastation and loss. Could they rebuild what had been broken? Could they find common ground amidst the ruins? The final battle came and went in a blur of fire and chaos, as Earth's warships clashed with the Coalition's forces. But the true battle was not fought in the heart of space, it was fought in the hearts of humanity's leaders. In the end, it was not the warships that determined the galaxy's future, but the choices of the people who led them. And as the smoke of battle cleared, the world watched, breathless, as President Vance made a decision that would change everything. That she reached out to Cholera. In that moment, humanity made its choice. They would not conquer the galaxy, they would join it. And so, the war ended not with the blast of cannons, but with the quiet promise of a new beginning. The galaxy, once divided by fear and conquest, began the slow, painful process of healing. Earth had not become the galaxy's tyrant, it had become part of its family. A new era had begun, one where peace, not power, would reign.